Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for some more Kings of War action. 1,500 points of Undead versus Dwarves. In the Dwarves' mountain home, they spotted that Derek, the Necromancer, on his journey back to his homeland, unfortunately tasked the job of carrying certain sacred artifacts, or unholy artifacts even, with zombies. And as you can see, they just dropped them all over the valley. So the dwarves are out there like a shot, as fast as their little dwarf legs can carry them. So that's a fancy way of saying this is the loot scenario. So there are 3 pieces of loot down the middle of the table that we're going to try to acquire and bring back to our own table edge. Dwarves notoriously struggle with this scenario because they're slow, but undead aren't exactly known for their lightning speed either. And we don't have anything that flies on the battlefield, so it should be fairly close. Let's have a look at the dwarf forces first of all, shall we? So, starting down at this end, what have we got here?
Units of Berserker Brock Riders, and next to those a charred and unpainted unit of Sharpshooters.
They're in their night camouflage, hiding behind the bushes, aren't they?
In the night camo. Followed by a horde of Ironclad with, I don't know if you can see, a nasty little Mastiff chomping at the bit to get the zombies. And then coming up the hill, we have an organ gun, hopefully covering all angles. Followed by another a small regiment of Ironclad.
Do they have a Mastiff as well?
Another Mastiff. Next to those, a regiment of Iron Guard, so slightly tougher, and another Mastiff. So we've got 3 of those raring to let loose.
These guys are armed not with shields, but with the bigger weapons, aren't they?
Yeah, so lower defence, but crushing strength. An army standard behind, and a king with the boomstick. And then hiding in the forest, we've got, I don't know if you can see him, Heneas the Hunter is hiding in 2 small trees.
He's in there somewhere.
He's down there. And he's supporting a unit of Rangers who are hopefully going to get up this left flank to claim that objective.
Right, so let's swing on round to the side and see what the undead are bringing to the party. Okay, starting at this end, we have a ghoul troop at the front. Easily distinguishable from the zombies because they're not green. Behind them we have a skeleton spearman horde and a regular skeleton horde, so a lot of skeletons. A necromancer who has the inspiring talisman to give a bit more inspiring to the army. We have a zombie legion, because why not? They're just fun. We've got a balefire catapult behind the zombie legion, probably the safest place you can be on this battlefield. Then we have a horde of zombie trolls, next to a vampire lord perched up on the hill. A regiment of revenant cavalry. And over on this flank, we have a regiment of zombies, so not quite so scary, and a troop of ghouls who are eyeing up this loot. So, a bit of an overview. It looks like the dwarves have left their left flank quite bare. There's only 1 unit over there, and they've concentrated a lot more stuff down here for the 2 loot markers on this side. And the undead are slightly more of an even spread. But that end of the battlefield is looking a little bit more sparse than the rest, so it's going to be an interesting little skirmish over there. Okay, so before turn 1, the dwarf vanguard units, these guys, and Mr. I'm hiding in the trees and can barely be seen by the camera, they all moved up a bit, and then undead got the first turn. So starting at this end, the ghouls moved straight onto this loot marker, and they've claimed it, so it's just in their ranks right now. The zombie regiment edged up a little bit. The Revenant Cavalry came up, along with the zombie troll horde, who were surged forward another few inches by the vampire. Over here, the zombie legion moved up, and they were surged an additional 4 inches by the necromancer, who's back here. Both the skeleton units are advanced up quite slowly, and those ghouls as well rushed straight onto that loot marker. So, laying the gauntlet down early, and as far as shooting went, the balefire catapult took aim at the organ gun, but rolled a 1, so completely missed. And that's it, not very eventful yet because there's no combat. So, over to the dwarves. Dwarf turn 1. So as you can see, not a huge amount of movement up because they're probably a little bit intimidated by the epic charge range of the Revenant Knights over there. So a little bit of advancing. And over here there was a whole lot of advancing because the cavalry, the Brock Riders, charged into the ghouls who were holding the loot marker, and as you can see, they killed them and claimed it as their own. Over in the middle with the organ gun, and the nicely camouflaged sharpshooters behind the hedge, they all fired into the zombie legion. They obviously consider that the number one threat at the moment, probably rightly so, and they managed to put 7 damage on it, but obviously not enough to do away with it just yet. Over here, the king with his boomstick unleashed a lightning bolt into the trolls, put 2 damage on them, not enough to do anything yet though, because they are undead. You need to put quite significant damage on them before they go down. Over here, you'll notice that this ghoul unit's gone as well. That's because the rangers there fired into them and completely pulverised them. And Mr. What's his name hiding in the trees?
Aeneas.
The hunter. He fired into the knights and put 2 damage points on them. So, a little bit of damage distributed among the undead. The 2 ghoul units are down. The loot marker is currently on the Brock Riders. Let's see how the undead can respond to this. Undead turn 2, and starting at this end, the zombies, with the small regiment, have made their way as close to that loot marker as possible. They couldn't quite reach it this turn. We slide along here. The zombie trolls have come up a bit. The vampire has stayed just out of charge range of the king, but within striking distance because he's a bit of a rapid beast himself. And here the Revenant Cavalry charged into these Iron Guard, did 6 points damage, couldn't roll high enough to affect them though, in the morale sense of the word at least. Over here, the organ gun was fired at by the balefire catapult again, but couldn't hit. It got 2, so it's getting better each time, so at this rate it'll hit in turn 5. In the middle here, the zombie legion picked up that loot marker, and I sense that they're going to be very difficult to shift from it. They've only taken 7 damage. These skeletons here were surged up an extra 7 inches, so they're right within striking distance of the dwarves, inviting the charge, perhaps, we shall see. And the necromancer has moved over there a little bit. Over here, the skeleton spearmen had a hindered charge into the front of the Brock Riders, and because of the hindrance, they only managed 1 point of damage, so that's not going to be enough to do anything to them yet. So, we'll see what the dwarves can do to counter this impending menace, because the undead are very close, and they're going to have to strike back now, I think. Dwarf turn 2, and it was quite action-packed. Over at this end, the Brock Riders retaliated against the skeletons and did 7 damage, not enough to do anything to them. The same goes for this combat here. The dwarves charged into the skeletons, 9 damage, not enough. The necromancer took 1 point of damage from the sharpshooters, not enough to get rid of him either. And as we whiz over here, the organ gun, I believe this time it fired into the zombie trolls, didn't it? So they've taken a fair bit of damage now. Not enough to remove them though. And the Revenant Cavalry paid the price for not removing those Iron Guard, because they were flank charged and front charged, and despite the fact that not much damage was done, it was just enough to remove them, despite the inspiring presence of the vampire as well. And over here, the zombies, the small regiment, took 1 point of damage from all those crossbows. So not a great shooting round for the dwarves, but a decent melee round. Took out the Revenant Cavalry. So it's looking pretty tense right now. The loot mark is currently in the hands of the Brock Riders over there, the zombie legion, and just sitting there in front of the zombies. So we'll see if that can be claimed momentarily. Well, Undead turn 3, and it was quite eventful. I feel like I say that a lot, but it was eventful. So the balefire catapult for the 3rd time took aim at the organ gun, which you'll notice is no longer there. There's just a flaming crater, because it did actually hit with a 6, rolled a 6 for the number of hits, so it was 8, and then every single one of those did damage. So it was basically toast. And then the nerve test just confirmed it, and it's gone. In the charge phase, I was able to countercharge with these units here, obviously, and the way this dwarf unit left themselves set up here, it allowed the zombie legion to charge them in the rear. So the zombie legion carrying the loot marker decided that they were going to have a quick charge into the rear of that unit, and the zombie trolls charged into the other dwarf unit there. The vampire decided his presence was not required, so he's gone off over there to help the zombies who picked up the loot marker deal with this threat over here. Now, in the combat, as you can see, this unit survived. They took 11 damage from 120 rear attacks from the zombie legion, and they just made it. They've got some inspiring presence there, but they are wavered. And the zombie trolls did enough on the iron guard here to finish them off, so they have gone. So, the dwarves looking a bit thin on the ground on this side of the table. It's looking better for them over here because they're only against a couple of skeleton hordes, and they do have possession of that loot marker. So it'll be interesting to see what the dwarves do to counter this, because that dwarf unit sandwiched between the zombie legion and the zombie troll horde are wavered, so they're going to be a little bit stuck. It's going to be interesting to see what they do about that vampire over there as well. So, let's see how they respond to that setback. Also, I summed up that turn before reforming this zombie troll horde to face that threat there. And just to remind all the viewers, I have been remembering my life leech. So, as you can see, regenerating whenever they do damage, which is very nice indeed. Dwarf turn 3. And their attempt to turn the tide of this battle resulted in everything that potentially could fire at the zombies doing so, and they've been removed. The combination of the rangers, that guy whose name I keep forgetting,
Heneas the Hunter.
Heneas the Hunter, and the king with his boomstick, they all fired into the zombie regiment and they were toasted. This unit of dwarves here failed their test to see if they could just act despite being wavered, but they failed, so they couldn't do anything. And these combats here, they're coming right down to the wire, it looks like, because this unit of skeleton spearmen took an additional 12 points of damage, I think. And then on the nerve test, a 4 was rolled. If it had been one more, they would have been gone. And this unit over here put quite a bit more damage on the skeletons. I think they did 7 more this turn. But again, couldn't quite get enough to remove them. So both the skeleton units are hanging on for their dear life. And in the undead turn, I think that unit of dwarves is doomed. It's pretty safe to assume. Undead turn 4, and the balefire catapult, short of other targets because it can't see anything, fired into the woods at Heneas the Hunter, but just missed unfortunately. Over here the vampire charged into the rangers. The zombie troll horde and the zombie legion charged into those dwarves there. I think you can guess what happened, but we'll get to that in a minute. And the 2 units of skeletons who just are clinging to life countercharged into their respective combats there. So, over here, we did a bit more damage to these units. They're up to 10, they're up to 12, but they're incredibly resilient, these dwarves, so they're not going anywhere. Over here, obviously, toast. A zombie legion in the rear and a troll horde in the front. They're never going to survive, so they're gone. And they've faced off into other directions to get involved in the battle again very shortly. These guys possibly looking over here at this loot marker. And the vampire didn't roll particularly well, and he did 3 damage to this unit of rangers, and not enough to remove them. But he is there threatening them. So, let's see what the dwarves can do about this. They're looking quite thin on the ground. They've lost 3 units, and they didn't have that many to begin with. This side's looking pretty solid, though. It looks like they're about to clear off a lot of the undead over here, which could change the way the battle looks quite significantly. Okay, so just a rules question for anyone out there who might be certain of this. The necromancer is wavered, so that limits what he can do. But because he's an individual, he can change his facing. So he started facing that way, he turned to face that way, which meant that he could then back up in that direction to get out of the line of sight of the sharpshooters over there. So just questioning exactly how this works, whether that's correct. It seems to be, as the rules are written, that seems to be right. If anyone knows otherwise, then please let me know. Dwarf turn 4, and starting over at this side, the rangers countercharged into the vampire, did 2 points of damage on him, not enough to waver him. And over here, the lightning bolt from the king, and Heneas the Hunter, as I'm going to call him from now on because it's easier to remember, fired at the zombie troll horde, put some more damage on them. Sliding over here, these 2 dwarf units finally took out the 2 skeleton hordes that were holding them up. So the skeleton hordes lasted a little bit longer than I anticipated. But the undead are looking quite thin on the ground as well now. Just a few characters, the catapult and those 2 hordes, or the legion and the horde right there. So it's looking pretty close, We're currently holding one loot counter each, and there's another one just in the middle of nowhere. So we'll see if that can be claimed. Undead turn 5, and it's getting pretty rapid fire now. So, over here, you can see that the zombie legion charged into this big horde here, and put a bit more damage on them. I think they did 5, and they managed to waver them, so that could be pivotal in the battle. We'll find out soon enough. The Necromancer is running over in this direction, away from the Brock Riders, because he doesn't fancy being on the menu for them. The Balefire Catapult missed shooting at the sharpshooters, so anything exciting to report there. The zombie troll horde are making their way over towards this loot marker, and by measuring out I've found out that they won't be able to make it in the next turn unless they are surged. So the vampire could have done with being available, but he couldn't quite finish off this unit of rangers because of the inspiring presence of Mr. Heinous in the woods there. Couldn't quite get rid of them, even though he did some significant damage to them. So it's over to the dwarves again, and they don't have too many options. The king is probably going to have a go at something, probably got some tricks up his sleeve. The Brock Riders are a little bit stuck out there. We'll see if they can get into the action as well. Dwarf turn 5. The Brock Riders decided that since they're carrying loot, they did not want to get involved in a fight over here, so they have backed up a little bit. This standard has moved around the back of this unit for a bit of safety. The sharpshooters moved up a little bit. This big ironclad unit charged into the zombie legion and completely failed their rolls and only did 4 damage to the legion, which, as you can guess, is nowhere near enough to hurt them. Then, as we swing over here, the zombie troll horde came under some serious firepower. They took a lightning bolt from the boomstick. They took some shots from Heinous. So they are up to 11 damage, but unfortunately for the dwarves, they couldn't roll enough to get rid of them. And over here, the rangers actually rolled really, really well against the vampire, and he's up to 5 points of damage, and they rolled just 1 off wavering him, which could have been huge for the battle. So this is potentially the final undead turn now. So we'll see where my priorities lie. Undead turn 6, potentially the last turn for the undead. The Balefire Catapult fired at the king, who had edged out into the open, but sadly it could not hit him. The zombie trolls have moved over in this direction, towards the loot marker. They're going to need another turn and a bit of surging to get onto it though, from the vampire who's sitting there after he munched through the remains of those rangers and got rid of them despite the inspiring Heinous presence in the woods. Over here, the zombie legion did quite a large amount of damage with their 40 attacks onto the ironclad, and despite that inspiring presence there of the standard, they are also gone. So both armies have taken huge casualties. The Brock Riders are holding a loot marker, the Zombie Legion are holding one, and there's another one up for grabs over here, which only the Zombie Troll Horde can potentially get to now, if they get 1 turn and a bit of surging, so there's going to be a bit of fortune required if they want it. So over to the final dwarf turn, and we'll see what they can actually do. Presumably they're going to pour some firepower into any units that are threatening their victory or potential draw. Dwarf turn 6, possibly their final turn. The well-camouflaged sharpshooters fired with unerring accuracy into the Balefire Catapult and removed it from the game. They did enough damage and rolled high enough, so it's gone. Over here, a combination of a lightning bolt from the king and Mr. Heinous managed to get rid of the zombie troll horde before they made it to the loot marker. So, the way it's looking, we're just holding 1 each at the moment, so if the game ends now, it's going to be a draw. If we get another turn, potentially there could be some change, but the way everything's spread out, I don't think too much would change with a couple of turns. But we'll find out. So let's have the roll, see if it ends. Dun dun dun.
Another turn, I think.
It's going to be another turn, yes, because 4 plus means another turn, I believe.
Yeah.
Undead turn 7. The Zombie Legion just backed up a little bit away from the dwarves. They're probably quite safe. They've got a Necromancer there as well to provide a bit of inspiring should the need arise. And over here, the Vampire, who's pretty much out of the action, decided that his last action would be to charge into Mr. Heinous, put 3 damage on him, life leeched a bit of his health back, and then wavered him as well. So, over to the dwarves, and I don't think a whole lot is going to change, but we'll see. They could shoot those zombies and get very, very lucky. We'll find out shortly. Dwarf turn 7. The standard healed these Brock Riders a little bit, with his ability that I've been forgetting to mention in my recaps. The sharpshooters and the king and his boomstick fired into the Zombie Legion in a last-ditch effort. They did a little bit of damage, but not enough to even think about removing them. Mr. Heinous shrugged off the effects of wavering, countercharged the vampire, did a point of damage, but couldn't waver him. So, there's one loot marker completely untouched right there. There is one in the possession of the Zombie Legion, and there's one in possession of the Brock Riders, which means it's 1-1, so it's a draw. And it was a complete bloodbath. Not a whole lot left, only a few units and quite a few characters. So let's get the old left-handed handshake live on camera.